Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us for this NetSupport DNA webinar this morning. My name's Matt Wilding. I head up our pre-sales team at NetSupport, and I'll be taking you through the software today. Also on the call, we have my colleague Adam Roberts, and he'll be monitoring the Q&A section of Zoom. So if you do have any questions during the demo, then please pop them in there and Adam will be able to answer them for you. So I'm just going to get my screen shared now, and we'll kick off the webinar. So NetSupport DNA is our IT asset management, safeguarding, and it also contains some technical tools in there to help you if you're a network manager or technician to manage the devices across your network. And it's basically made up of three components. So there is a NetSupport DNA server that needs installing on a server on your network. The NetSupport DNA console, which is what you use to manage the data that we collect and administrate your machines. That's what you can see on my screen here. And then finally, there's an agent that you would deploy out across to the machines on your network, and that allows them to capture certain information and allows you to manage those machines there. Now, this morning, I'm logged into the software with full administrator permission, so I have access to all the functionality. If you have users who are monitoring the safeguarding side of the software, we have specific roles for those users. So you're not going to have your safeguarding team starting to remote control machines and deploy software. They have a very limited access to what they can do, so they can just review the safeguarding phrase matches. So if we jump into the console and start taking a look at what we've got, down the left-hand side here, you'll see I've got a tree menu. And this is how we lay out our devices and users. And I can flip between the devices and users modes using these tabs at the top. So at the moment, I'm browsing by device, but I can click and I can browse by user. Now, when it comes to organizing your devices and users, there's two ways we can do this. So if you've got a Windows domain, we can mirror your Active Directory structure. So if you've got everything nicely organized and laid out, we can mirror that. So it saves you from having to organize your devices and users within NetSupport DNA. If you do have devices that perhaps aren't domain joined or they're non-Windows devices, so they're not in your Active Directory, we've got another feature which we call department mode. And departments are basically like folders or OUs, and you basically create the departments that you need, and you can then manually drag and drop users and devices there so that you can easily access them, and there's some kind of structure within your DNA console. So if we take a look at the right-hand side here, you'll see I've got a dashboard which gives me some certain key information. And the really powerful thing about DNA is what is displayed on the right-hand side of the screen here is based on what you've selected on the left. So it's really easy for you to get a picture of what's going on across your entire network. So if I just click on my room one here, you can see it's just returning information for these 4 machines, but I can also drill down and I can look at an individual machine here. So if I pick a machine there, you can see the data's changing to reflect just the information for that particular machine. And this is a function that's available across the whole of the software. I can also do the same thing for my users. So if I jump in here, you'll see I've got a slightly different dashboard, but if I jump up a level, that's changing the information there to reflect the 3 users I've got selected. You'll also see I've got another couple of options across here. So I can also monitor SNMP devices across my network. So if you've got switches, printers, we can pull some information back from those. And we've also got a discovery tool. So when you install the DNA server and the console, you can actually do a scan across your network and see what devices are out there. And you can also deploy the software to Windows devices using this. So any devices that we found, you can push the agent on, and that obviously allows us to get a bit more information from those devices. Final thing I want to talk about on this left-hand side is our dynamic groups. So these are really useful. These allow you to group devices and users based on criteria that you can set up. So we ship the software with some dynamic groups already created, but you can create additional ones depending on your needs. And the dynamic groups allow us to group machines, for example, by operating system, by hardware, by software that's installed or not installed. So quite often when you're trying to identify something on your network, maybe you need to see all the machines that have got less than 4 GB of RAM? It's actually not a difficult question, but actually pulling that information together can be quite time consuming. So as they suggest, dynamic groups will pull in users or devices if they match the criteria. If the status of that user or device changes and they no longer meet the criteria to be in that group, they will automatically leave. So you're getting basically a live picture of whatever criteria you've set up for your dynamic group there. Now, if I jump along the top here into our Explorer view, you can see I can display thumbnails of the devices on my network, so I can see what's going on. And if I select one of my devices and double click it, I can pop out a window, and this allows me to remote control that device. Now, there's 3 levels of remote control I can have. At the moment, I'm in share mode, so I'm sharing the control with the user on that device. I can also enter into a watch mode so that my keyboard and mouse inputs won't be sent over to that device. Or I can use control mode, and this disables the keyboard and mouse on the local device. So if perhaps a student is using that, you need to do some work, you don't want to be fighting for control with them, you can use that mode. We've also got some other useful features, so I can capture a screenshot of what's currently on the desktop. I can launch an application. So if I just type in the application name here, that will launch the application on the remote machine. And then I've got things like I can simulate a Control-Alt-Delete key press. So if I'm maybe using the software to manage a server and I need to simulate that to log in, I can do there. Now, a couple of things I want to point out about the remote control. The way we've got it set up here is so it's very easy to demo, but there are certain features you can enable if you're using the software on users that have potentially got sensitive information on their computers, so people perhaps in your HR or finance department. So first of all, for selected users or devices, we can choose not to display the thumbnail here. So if somebody has got HR or finance records up, you potentially don't want to be seeing those viewable in the console. The other thing we can do is we can require permission from the user on the device before you can start a remote control session. So you saw me just sort of immediately start a session there. When that security is switched on, what would happen is you double click on a machine and you won't be able to see the desktop or take remote control until the user on that machine has granted you permission. So you've got the flexibility if you're using the software with a mixture of users. Certain users you can jump straight on, but users who are accessing more sensitive information, you can give them the security that you can't just be jumping on their machine and seeing what they're doing without them being aware. Now, if I right click on a device, I've got some more options here. So under the remote menu item, I can do a file transfer. So I can send files or folders to the machine, or I can retrieve files and folders back from the remote machine. I've also got access to a remote command prompt or PowerShell. I've got a remote registry editor, and I've also got access to a remote task manager, so I can see any processes running on the machine. I can also see the services, and I can interact with these as well. So if I need to restart a service, I can do it through here rather than maybe having to jump onto the desktop and disrupt what the user's doing. I've also got the ability to message or chat with the user on that device. And then I've got some power management. So if you've got Wake on LAN configured on your devices, I can power a device on. I can also power a device off or restart it. And these power management settings can also be scheduled. So you can schedule power ons for your devices. You can schedule power offs. We can also set up periods where if devices are inactive for a certain amount of time, they can be shut down as well. So you can use the software to hopefully reduce your energy bill. I can also come in here and edit some details about the device. So I've got the ability to enter an asset tag. I can also enter an owner, so that could be a person, or if a device belongs to a certain department. I can even include things such as an invoice number, how much I paid for the device when it was purchased. The other thing I can do is set up contracts against the devices. So if you perhaps lease your machines, or you've purchased a group of machines and you've got an extended warranty, you can add information about those contracts into NetSupport DNA, and then you can tag those to the relevant machines. And the advantage of that is it then allows you to report on that information. So if you need to know how many machines you've got that are going to be out of warranty in perhaps 6 months' time, if you've got the information within NetSupport DNA, you can run a report off and you can pull that information out really quickly and easily. So moving on to our user details, couple of useful features here. So first of all, I can see when machines have been used. So this is great for identifying machines that are perhaps on your network and they're not being switched on. They could maybe be utilized better if they're moved to another area. So we've got various sort of date ranges here. And if I expand out this bit here, you can see it's showing me the 4 demo machines I've got running here that have been switched on today. The other thing we can do from the user details is set up acceptable user policies. And these can operate in a couple of ways. You can have them display every time a user logs on to the device, or you can have them displayed once a user agrees to that policy, and then we store some information on when the user acknowledged that. So if I select one of my policies here and go into view, you can see I've got the time and date my users agreed to the policy there. Now, it's possible to set up different acceptable user policies for different sets of machines or different sets of users. So if you want, if you've got machines that are in a particular area that need to have particular policies when they're used, we can do that. Or if you've got staff, students, and you need them to agree to slightly different policies, the software can handle that particular scenario as well. Jumping on into the activity view. So this is really great if you need to sort of investigate something that's happened on a machine. So what this activity view will do is it will keep a rolling 30-day record of websites visited, applications run, log-ons and log-offs of the device, and also if a user has triggered any phrases as part of our safeguarding. So you can see that I've spent a little bit of time before the webinar this morning just running some information on one of the machines here. So you can see the time I've logged on, websites I've visited, and the applications that I've loaded up there. It's also possible to filter some of this information, and you can do that by category. So, for example, if I'm not interested in logons, I can hide that. But you can also exclude activity that's happened for less than a certain amount of time. So you can see here that I'm filtering out any activity that's happened for less than 5 seconds. Now, at the moment, I'm viewing this by device, but it's also possible to view this information by user. So if I wanted to pick on a particular user, I can see exactly what they've been doing, and I can see exactly what machine that they were logged onto when they were doing that. So if I just expand that a little bit out for you, there you can see that. Next, we've got our hardware inventory, and there's 2 ways you can view this. If you've got multiple machines selected, it will group the devices based on certain hardware criteria. You can set that criteria up here on the top right. So if I expand this out, it's going to show me all the machines running this particular CPU. But if I select an individual device, I can then get a full hardware breakdown for that specific device. So I've got some information about the operating system here. And then you can see as I scroll down, CPU, memory, I've got information about the network, drive space, and so on and so forth there. Jumping on to our software inventory. So if I just change the view here. So this works in a kind of similar way. So because I've got multiple machines selected, it's showing me the software that it's found across all of these 4 machines. And again, if I expand out here, it's showing me specifically where this particular application has been installed. The other nice thing about this feature is we can use it to allocate licenses to software packages. So you can see here, I've just added 10 licenses to AutoIt. We've got this installed on 1 device, so it's telling me that I've got 9 available licenses left. We can also set up alerts within DNA. So if you exceed your license limits, you can either be alerted from within the console, or you can have an email sent to you. So we don't control and block software from running if you've exceeded the license, but it's more of a tool to allow you to identify where perhaps you aren't compliant with your software licensing, and you can either remove software or go and purchase additional licenses to make sure that everything you run in is nice and legal there. If I click on an individual device here, you can see I've got a breakdown of the software on that device. And the other thing I'm going to show you this morning is the hotfixes feature. So I can also view the Windows updates that have been installed on a device. And this can be quite a powerful tool when used in conjunction with the dynamic groups. So if you imagine a scenario where there is a serious vulnerability identified in Windows and you need to make sure that all your machines are patched, you could set up a dynamic group that says, show me all the other machines without KB, whatever the fix released by Microsoft is called. You can then push the update out across your network, and you can know once that dynamic group is empty, all your machines are safely patched and they're going to be secure there. So combining different areas of the software can make DNA a very powerful tool. Now, moving along to our USB device control, just let me drop back a little bit so I've got some data in here. So USB device control allows you to control the use of USB storage devices across your network. And you can do that in a number of ways. So you could block their use completely, and that is fine, but quite often that's not a perfect scenario because sometimes people have a legitimate need for using those particular devices. So what you can do is you can do things like allow those devices to be used, but perhaps only in read-only mode. So you can allow users to bring files in that they may maybe need to, but you can be confident that you're not having users copy off any confidential information, and then if they lose that USB device, you potentially could be having to deal with a data breach. The other thing we can do is we can authorize specific devices for a specific amount of time. So if I want to come in here and I go on to manage, so if we manage perhaps, imagine perhaps this iPad, a teacher has used this to take some pictures they want to use in their lesson. I can come in here and I can find that particular user. So if I just drill down and we'll find a user there. So we'll imagine this is our teacher. I can then allow this device indefinitely, or I could say to them, okay, you need to copy your pictures off. I'm going to give you till 5 o'clock today to do that. After 5 o'clock, that device is then going to be blocked. You can also use this where perhaps you're using sort of cameras, and you want somebody to be able to plug that camera in and use that. But that's then restricted to their user account and only that device. They can't start plugging in phones and other devices that may be compromising your network there. So next up, I'm going to talk about the Esafety. So this is all about keeping your students safe when they're using devices. And a big part of our Esafety is phrase matching. So the software comes with a built-in phrase list. So if I just bring that up here, and you can see we've got a whole variety of categories here. So adults, terms, drugs. We've also got radicalization. So if you're in the UK, this can help you in terms of meeting your prevent obligations. In addition to our English phrases, we've also got language packs for all of these different languages. So schools obviously now, very multicultural. There's every chance you've got a student who speaks a language in addition to English. So in order to make sure we're safeguarding those students as well, you can switch on whichever language packs here are relevant for the languages spoken in your school. If I just scroll down here, so we take a look at the German language packs. You see I've got my German phrases here, and then we've got an English explanation for each of these words. So if you did spot one of these words being used across your network, you're quite possibly not fluent in German, you've got an English explanation, so you can get an idea of maybe what was going on when that phrase was typed. In addition to the built-in phrases, it's also possible to add your own phrases here. So if there is something that isn't in our language pack, or there's a particular phrase that's sort of relevant for your local area, or maybe someone's being bullied, a certain nickname's being used, you want to detect that use across your network, you can enter that there. And what happens when a phrase is detected depends on this priority, which is displayed in this column here. So at the lowest level, we just record that the phrase has been seen. At the medium level, we record that the phrase has been seen, and we can also have an email sent out to selected users. At the high level, we also capture a screenshot, so you've got a bit more context. And at the most urgent level, we also capture a video there. So if I quickly come out of here and give you an example. There. So we pick on this particular trigger here. You can see that we've captured a screenshot, so we've got some context, we've got details of the user that triggered the phrase, and we've also got the device information there as well. Now, when you come in here, when a phrase has been first triggered, it's going to come in with a status of new, but you can change that status as you review the phrase trigger. And you can also add in notes. So if you need to, add in particular reasons, so perhaps, this user was researching drugs because it was a drugs education lesson, you can add a note in there to indicate that. The other thing you'll see on the right-hand side is our risk index. And every single phrase that we capture, we give a score out of 100. So this is to help the people reviewing the phrases sort of focus in on the more serious phrases first, rather than sort of other ones that maybe have triggered in error, or it's sort of maybe it's low-level misbehavior rather than a specific safeguarding risk. So what we do to calculate this score is we look at a number of factors. So it has the student being flagged up as vulnerable. So you can flag up any users within the software as being a vulnerable student. That will increase this score here. Have they reported a concern? I will show you that in a moment. Is the device supervised or unsupervised? So we can flag up any devices as being unsupervised within the software. And the way we would categorize that, an unsupervised PC would perhaps be one that's in a corridor or a common room or in the library where there's not necessarily somebody monitoring that device all the time. Has the incident happened outside of normal lesson time? So before the school day has started or after it has ended? The source, so you can flag up applications and websites as being higher risk. So in terms of applications, you might want to flag your browsers as being high risk there. That will then feed into this score. Keyword severity, so some of this is obvious. A higher urgent phrase is going to carry a higher score than a low or medium one, but we also look at the category. So anything in the suicide or self-harm category would carry more of a weighting than something in cybersecurity. And then we look at historical incidents. So if a student is continually triggering phrases in the same category over a short period of time, that will bump this score right up here. So a couple of other ways of viewing the data. So you've seen I've kind of got it in a list view here, but one of the other views we've got is our phrase cloud. So this is a really popular view with safeguarding staff in schools, because it really gives you a quick and easy way to sort of identify what's trending across your network. And as I mentioned at the start, this is a nice way of kind of drilling down and seeing what's going on an individual machine. Or again, I can pick an individual user. So if somebody sort of mentioned, we think that perhaps Matt Wilson here, give that a second to load there, is doing has been up to something they maybe shouldn't have been doing. I can select Matt Wilson or select Sarah there, and I can see exactly what this particular user has been doing. We've obviously also got filtering options. You can filter down to specific categories. You can filter down to specific statuses, so just show me phrases that haven't been reviewed, that kind of thing. Moving on, we've also got our alerts feature, and this allows you to set up alerts based on the console. So you can see if people are making changes within the console. We can set up server alerts. So this can identify here when you're sort of carrying out activities in DNA. If you're perhaps trying to deploy some software and it's failed, we can have alerts warning you of that. But maybe the most powerful feature of this is the PC alerts. So what this allows you to do is set up alerts for either all or certain devices across your network. And it's really kind of about preventative maintenance. It's allowing you to be alerted when certain criteria are met, so you can hopefully sort of jump in and resolve that problem before it starts impacting your users. So we can do things like monitor the amount of free space left on a hard drive. We can monitor if Windows has triggered an error message. We can scan the event log for certain events going in there. We can even monitor if a keyboard or mouse has been unplugged from a device. So I know, particularly in schools, that can sometimes be an issue, people removing those. You can be alerted to those particular incidents as well. And the alerts can either be raised just within the DNA console, or you can be emailed those if it's something more serious and you perhaps want to be made aware of that out of hours. We've also got our history feature here. This allows you to track the history of hardware and software across your network. So I'll give you a quick example of the software here. So you can see this device has updated Microsoft Edge this morning. So it's gone from build 42 to 48. So again, this can be very helpful when you're trying to troubleshoot problems, particularly with software that auto updates. Has that problem been caused by an update that's broken something rather than something else? Jumping into our energy monitor here, so obviously quite topical at the moment. This allows you to track the energy usage across the devices on your network. So we've got two bars here. So energy use in is during school hours. Energy use out is showing the energy use outside the standard school hours. So it helps you identify if you've got devices being left on after hours, potentially running up electricity bills when they don't need to be. If I expand this out, it's going to show me a breakdown of these specific machines, how long that they've been running for, and you can also enter some costings for what you pay for your electricity. So it can give you an approximate figure of what running that machine for that length of time is costing you. Moving on, we've got our internet metering. So this allows you to track websites that have been visited by your users. If I just expand this out, it will show me every single user or device that's visited that website. Useful thing in this view is the active time. So the start and the end time will show when the web page was first loaded up and when the browser or tab was closed, but the active time shows how long it was in focus. So if you're using this to try and identify if people are wasting time on certain websites, it's a really useful figure to be able to look at. So just because somebody perhaps had Facebook open doesn't necessarily mean they're on Facebook for 4 hours. They could have been on for 5 minutes, minimized it and been getting on with something else. Also using DNA, it's possible to block certain websites, and that can be done as a blanket block across your whole network, or it can be targeted at specific users, and it can also be done on a time basis. So perhaps you're happy for students to use YouTube, but you only want them to be able to access it during the lunch hour. Moving on to our application metering. This is kind of a similar thing, but for applications. So you can see here, it's showing me the applications that have been run, and we've got that same active time as well. So you can identify how long somebody was actually had that application in focus rather than just how long an application had been run. But this is a particularly useful tool when it comes to perhaps identifying, have you got any software that's not being used, you're paying for licenses for, or if you're re-imaging your machines, are you including packages on those images that maybe don't need to be there. Our print monitor will allow you to track print usage across your network. So just jump back here to get some data in. So we can identify your printers. You can enter a costing in for your printing. So we're costing in for black and white, for color printing, if your devices support that. And then what we can do is we can see who's printed, how much they've printed, and then we can identify what that has actually cost. So if you need a way of charging sort of printing to certain users or departments, this can be a useful tool to do that. And then finally, I'm just going to quickly talk about the software distribution feature. So this allows you to package up applications and deploy them to your devices. Now, obviously, there's lots of different ways you can deploy Windows applications to devices, but there's a few nice features that we've got in DNA. So, first of all, we can do a schedule. So, if I just come in and just pick a piece of, I want to do that. Let's do it from here. If I pick a piece of software to deploy, you can see here when I go to deploy a piece of software, I can do it immediately, or I can deploy it at a set time and date. So if you've been asked to maybe deploy something, you don't want to do it, maybe in the middle of the morning, users using the devices, you perhaps want to deploy it out at lunchtime when those devices aren't going to be in use. So you can set that up and have that automatically deploy later. The other thing we've got is a retry count. So this can be useful if you've got devices that have kind of gone off site. When you deploy to them, if they're not connected to your DNA server, the deployment won't work. But we can have DNA monitor for up to 6 months. So the next time it sees that device, it knows that a package is supposed to be deployed, and it will automatically deploy to that particular packet, to that particular device there. So it saves you from having to kind of manually keep an eye and remember maybe what devices weren't available when you did a specific software deployment there. So that brings us to the end of the webinar for today. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you all again soon.